Hello everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist. Welcome to my channel. Those of you who are returning, welcome back. Those of you who are brand new, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first novel. And on my channel, we dig into the psychology behind writing, the psychology behind characters, world building, because that's how you build an in-depth story. So for today, we are continuing on with my trope diagnosis series. So, since this is Sidekick month for me, I wanted to dig into a very popular one, which is I hate you, but we need each other. This one is all over the place. It's in books, it's in comics, it's in cartoons, it's in movies. You essentially have two characters that for whatever reason they don't like each other, but one has a skill or an ability or knowledge the other one needs, and so they're forced in a situation where they have to work together. So this one is ripe for comedy, and it usually takes full advantage of it, because whenever you have two people together that do not get along, conflict follows, and as a general rule, in conflict equals comedy in a lot of situations, because essentially conflict is two ideas that do not mesh with each other, that they don't agree. And when two people, typically these two people are usually very stubborn, so they're very set in their ideas, they're very set in their beliefs. So when you introduce a scenario where they're having to work with someone who does not share the same belief, and in many times even has an opposite belief of something that they're very passionate about, you have a problem. So the fun thing about this trope is them having to figure out how to stay true to themselves and still work with this other person. That's usually where the real drama of this comes from. Is it's not so much that they are necessarily dead set against the other person's ideas. It's they are dead set against changing theirs. And that's not the same thing. I think a lot of times people assume it is because most of the time they are kind of similar, but they're not the same thing. And a lot of times with morals, particularly morals and beliefs, these are formed over the years. You first start to get your idea of morals and beliefs from your parents or your family, whomever you're around. And then as you grow older, you start to process the rationale behind it. When you hit your teenage years, you get influence from your other friends. And that's why a lot of times you hang out with people who have the same beliefs that you do. And that just feeds the ideas over and over again. So you form your own thoughts on how the world works, what's right, what's wrong. Now you're with someone who has formed usually an opposite thought. So morals and beliefs, in a way, are like lenses through which we view the world. They're how we interpret situations. They're how we interpret people's intent, people's actions. So they're a very core part of our personality, which is why people changing their morals and changing their beliefs usually takes a pretty big catalyst for that to happen, or some other type of epiphany. Like maybe they come to understand something differently. Maybe something is revealed to them they didn't realize before, things like that. So, in a situation where not only are you with someone who has opposite or nearly opposite moral beliefs or ideas than you do, but you now have to work together with them. Cooperation usually requires a delicate balance, kind of like when you get into a relationship with someone. You generally have to share common values. If you don't have at least your top 5 common values, at least some of them the same, it's usually going to fall apart because, like I said, this dictates how you see, how you interpret things, how you believe in things. So with cooperation, you don't need as many to be the same, but you still need some to be the same. The more that are the same, the easier the collaboration is going to be. Now, that being said, is there strength in people having different opinions? Absolutely. That's why we often are asking, okay, give me your thoughts, give me your ideas, because we're trying to get a different viewpoint. But there should be something in the viewpoint that we can relate to. If there's not anything that we can relate to, we have a hard time grasping it, and not only grasping the concept itself, but grasping why someone else would have developed this idea or this concept. That's one thing that goes into this situation. The other thing is that most of the time you have people who have different skills, different types of intelligences. And I'm still doing my series on different types of intelligences, but basically, just because you're intelligent in books, for example, does not mean you're going to be good at, say, music. Or maybe you're someone who's really good at living off the land, but you really don't understand science or math. It just doesn't click with you for whatever reason. Most of the time, these are people that have conflicting intelligence styles. So you have someone who's normally perhaps what we call the rational thinker. They're thinking through things in a logical sense. Okay, this is most likely to be effective, this is least likely to be effective, so on and so forth. The other person is usually more what we would call an emotional thinker. They're thinking more in terms of feelings and abstract ideas, not necessarily as based in logic as this other person. So we have something in therapy we call the wise mind, which is used not primarily, but it's very popular when treating people that have difficulty with emotional regulation. And that is this idea that we have two parts of our thinking. We have our emotional mind, which is exactly what I just described. Plain emotion. I'm making decisions based on my emotions. We have our rational or logical mind, which is I'm making my decisions based on observable facts, straight logic. When you use them together, you get what we call the wise mind, which is where essentially you have to decide, okay, which one do I need to use based on the situation? And when you have these two characters that are conflicting, it's kind of a similar situations going on. The idea is for them to work together so that both their strengths contribute to the scenario. But most of the time they are very set in, this is how I always make my decisions, this is how I always make my decisions. So most of the time they're both very independent. In order to get a real conflict going, they almost have to be independent, because if you have someone who is, for example, a leader, and then you have someone who's by nature a follower, even if the follower doesn't necessarily always agree with what this leader is saying, their personality makes it less likely for them to speak out and cause conflict. So, but most of the time, like I said, in this scenario, you have two independent people together. And the thing I like is that this can usually go one of two ways. You either have these two people that eventually learn to get along and they actually start to like each other, either as friends or as something else, or they get along because they have to and they still hate each other. This one I don't see as much, but it is honestly more realistic. I have nothing against characters getting a character arc and thinking and changing, and I think that's great. It makes for a great story. But I wouldn't mind seeing more of this one just because I don't see it as much. And I really think when people are using this trope, it's very tempting to go, well, let's make them friends. But you kind of have to look at, why are they arguing in the first place? What is it that they are in conflict about? And if it's something very major to their personality, like something very major to their belief system, or like I said, their morals or things like that, they may gain an understanding of the other person, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to change what they think. And I think that is kind of a good lesson in itself, that you can get along with someone and not necessarily agree with them. That can happen. Because essentially in these situations, it's usually a survival situation. In that kind of situation, you're going to be focused on, what do I need to do to get out of this fight or flight mode that I'm stuck in because of this situation that I'm in. So arguing about petty things like so and so's favorite football team or whatever, that's not as important. But what will come up are things like, well, I don't think it's right that we kill the rabbit to survive. Well, we have to eat, but I don't want to kill the rabbit. Those are the kind of things that are going to come up. And it can lead to some really good conversations, actually. This is a really good way, I think, to dive into what makes your characters up. Because if you have them in conflict and they're with each other, the things that are going to make them fight are going to be things that are very important to them, very passionate to them. And that is a great way to flesh out each of these characters. One thing I do caution, though, that I do see when this is done, is usually there's one of the two is usually the hero is selected to have the superior thought process. And I think that's a mistake, because each person in this scenario should contribute something. Because if the hero is not getting anything from this companion, why are they sticking with them? What purpose are they serving? But if you have the hero contributing something and then their companion giving something back, and then they can go back and forth, that creates a much more, one, realistic scenario, but a much more interesting one. Because like I said, I wouldn't mind seeing more where they don't like each other, and they're probably never going to like each other, but they can understand the importance in the scenario to work together. Now, how long it takes them to figure that out, that's kind of up to you. I will say, though, in a survival situation, the more dire your circumstances, like if you're running out of food, you're running out of water, you're running out of shelter, you are more likely to kind of put aside your own arguments, beliefs, and things like that to work on what you have to do in the moment. It's not that you abandon them, but it's that you kind of put them aside and say, okay, this is something I can't deal with right now. I need to focus on the moment. And that's usually what ends up happening. So this is a fun one. And like I said, it can be done one of two ways. If you have them decide to become friends, then that's usually when you have, like I said, people that have values that can be compatible. Usually the one where they do not become friends is because their values are what we call incompatible. They can't, one won't give them up, one won't change them, but they don't fit together. That's an incompatible set of values. But, like I said, in this situation, we can kind of push those to the side and focus on staying alive. So thank you guys for chiming in for this video. This one is a fun trope. I don't see it, like I said, going the we still don't like each other way. So I like to see more of that. But either way, this one is fun. It usually leads to a lot of interesting conversations and scenarios. So I'm always looking forward to seeing more of those. Thank you guys for chiming in. And as always, if you have suggestions or comments, leave them below. I will always be glad to check those out. If you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any uploads that I do. And until next time, I hope you guys have a good one.